Welcome to Curb Enthusiasm. I'm Emily Weidenhof.
And I'm David Breen.
Our guest today brings 25 years of experience working with cities and communities to envision and redevelop transportation infrastructure into public space. He's been a consultant at Bloomberg Associates since 2014 and has worked with major cities like Los Angeles, Athens, Bogota, Milan, and Mexico City in redesigning their public spaces and transportation infrastructure.
Prior to that, he served as Assistant Commissioner at the New York City Department of Transportation, spearheading the agency's efforts to reposition city streets as public space, with major projects like launching and overseeing the Plaza program, managing the redesign of Times Square, and negotiating the country's first public-private partnerships for on-street public space, a model now replicated around the world. It's our pleasure to welcome Andy Wiley-Schwartz to the podcast.
Welcome, Andy, back to 55 Water Street. We are super excited to have you here today and talk about Broadway, a street that is near and dear to all of our hearts.
It's actually great to be back. I haven't been here in a long time, but it feels and looks the same. And I always love spending time with you. So let's have some fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say let's start at the beginning. But okay. Broadway has such a deep, long history, as a footpath, as Eric Sanderson talked a little bit about in a previous episode.
Right.
But let's take it to maybe your beginning at DOT with Broadway. When you came here, what did you see, and what was the potential?
When I came here, when Jeanette Sadekhan hired me to work on the public realm strategy for New York, which was pretty audacious in and of itself, given that we were at a DOT, we were looking at lots of different spaces and lots of different typologies. But Broadway was very much on everybody's mind. And it took us a little while to get to a point where we were ready to really envision it. That sort of culminated in a presentation at City Hall, where we got sort of the basic sign-off to pursue the idea. And that's when I went into one of the little conference rooms at City Hall, and I called Tim Tompkins, who was the head of the Times Square Alliance, and he and I had been like nibbling around the edges of the sidewalks, trying to gather just like a tiny bit more room and space for people, because, there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pedestrians in Times Square and only, a couple tens of thousands of cars. And so the space was really, really broken at that point. I don't know if people really remember, but it was really broken. Just people pouring into the street and pouring off the sidewalks. And, we have pictures and documentation of this, and it was really scary. And I was able to call him up and say, okay, are you sitting down? Because we're going to go for the whole thing. We're not just going to go around the edges.
Yeah.
And working with that partnership was really crucial.
Yeah. And I think you're raising something, people don't just all get on board because it's a good idea. How did you really craft the momentum around a problem and get people invested in change and fixing something?
Oh, that's a great question. So it really happened at two levels. So there was like this big communication level, which really kind of blew my mind at the time, because I had always been looking at this as a public space problem, and that Times Square wasn't achieving its potential as a great public space, as the crossroads of the world, as a place where all these great things could happen. And, the streets were just in the way as far as I was concerned. This was when I started at DOT. So this was a big lesson for me, because really what happened sort of at the high level was the project was reimagined much more holistically and defined as a traffic and transportation problem, a safety problem, and then it would have this benefit of creating this public space. And that was revealing, because everyone understood that Times Square was broken, right? That transportation in Times Square was broken, that you couldn't drive through Times Square effectively. Maybe you didn't know exactly why, two streets cross each other, like it's a mess. and there's all these people everywhere. And so we reframed the conversation after a discussion here at City Hall as green light for Midtown, where we were making traffic work better in Midtown by taking this redundant street out of the grid. And I mean, Broadway is, again, like just with all the thinking that public realm people had done, we just didn't really think about it as this street that diagonally cut through the entire grid and sort of threw off all the signals and all the systems that the grid was supposed to manage and make it successful. So that was a big lesson for me. And I think we did an amazing job here. There was a lot of, a lot of really smart people obviously working here on the problem, but they also got on board, because the engineers and the people who had been sort of pushing back against the advocates who wanted change in Times Square understood that they were now to deliver a certain outcome, and they wrapped their heads around that, and they figured out how to do it. And it actually really worked. I mean, honestly, sometimes you put your finger on the scale a little bit to make something work. But in this case, our biggest problem was that we kind of oversold the benefits on the traffic side, and it really came out as a smaller benefit in like bus speeds and travel times than we had sort of promised people. So it took a little while for this not to seem like, we failed because we didn't achieve the traffic benefits, but all the while we were getting this enormous public space benefit. And I think that was really the key.
Yeah.
Our approach to so many of the projects along the corridor have really stemmed from traffic problems, right?
Right.
Like thinking about Flatiron, for example, you had a very similar problem where Fifth Avenue joins Broadway, joins 24th Street at exactly the same point. Mm-hmm. And we're left with this huge traffic problem. A traffic problem in terms of how do you safely organize those three converging traffic moments at one moment, but then also this seriously negative impact for pedestrians at the same time. Like, if I remember, that was the widest crosswalk or the longest crosswalk in the city.
Yeah.
Because you literally had to cross three streets at the same time.
That's right.
And so how do you tip the scale to favor pedestrians, to improve pedestrian safety, but also overcome this what is fundamentally a traffic problem?
In both of those cases, in Times Square and in Flatiron, and I think Flatiron we did first, you had two downtown avenues crossing. So Broadway downtown, Fifth Avenue downtown. And in both cases, the traffic didn't get prioritized to go where it wanted to go downtown, right? So 7th Avenue traffic that wanted to go downtown got shuffled over to Broadway. 5th Avenue traffic wound up on Broadway. Broadway traffic wound up on Fifth Avenue. I remember even once I did a walk down Broadway before I joined DOT, all the way from Spuyten and Duyvil all the way down to the Battery. And it took us like 2 or 3 blocks to realize when we had walked through the Flatiron district that we were on Fifth Avenue. We weren't even on Broadway anymore. Like the whole thing misdirected everyone. Right. And so again, like shaping the transportation context of the area was incredibly important. And then looking at the public realm aspects, and you have this beautiful park right next door. Why are you creating more public space here? But it really was fixing the street, and the dynamism and success of that space is due to a lot of factors. But you're absolutely right. It's that shaping that problem first, and then convincing all the property owners that this is going to work, right?
It's fixing the street, but then also recognizing that people use public spaces in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. We always used to use this one photograph of the Flatiron Plaza from this really cold, wintry day in I think it was in March, where you had people sitting in the plaza, but then Madison Square Park in the background was completely empty. And it's just this recognition that the street isn't necessarily a destination, but it's a moment to pause. It's a moment to gather yourself. If you've got 30 seconds to take a call or
that's right.
have a quick coffee, whatever it may be, you're there.
No, that's exactly right. We always, and Emily and I talked a lot about this when we worked together, it's really just a big wide piece of sidewalk, and you don't have to make a decision to go in. And I think that's really important. Like, you might not even think it's important, but every single park in New York City has a fence around it and a gate. And you have to find where the gate is and then go in there. It's a decision you're making to go be in that space and stay there for some period of time. So the movable furniture and the sidewalk part of the plaza is the key, because you can just stop for a second and answer a text, or stop for a second and make a phone call, or tie your shoe, or sit down with a coffee. And so it's a totally different kind of public space that I think we're all figuring out how to enjoy and use and work with. And the public part of it is so important, right? Even a park has that feeling of like, I'm in an enclosed area, right? And this is just the thing I used to say was that it's like why everybody hangs out in the hallway at a party, right? Because they want to watch everybody walking by and it's active, or sometimes they're all crowded in the kitchen because that's like where the drinks are and like people are always hanging out there, and the living room is empty, right? And I think it's sort of the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned the Times Square Alliance. We have kind of amazing partners along the Broadway corridor, including the 34th Street Partnership, Garment District, Flatiron Nomad bid, Union Square bid. Can you talk about the role of that partnership, especially creating spaces where the culture and use really is changing, in a world where DOT was absolutely set up to take care of our streets for vehicles.
Yeah.
Filling the potholes, replacing the signs.
You desperately need that partnership, because not only is DOT built around taking care of the streets, but the streets are now functioning as like literally the veins and arteries of the city, not just to carry vehicles, but also to carry water and steam and electricity and everything else, right? You need to plow the snow. You need to do all of these things. And the city is to pick up the trash, right? You put your trash out on the curb and then a garbage truck comes by and picks it up. What happens if you eliminate the ability for all those things to happen in this space? You've basically told people that they need to reinvent their whole idea of the city in a way. And so we're fortunate here that our business improvement districts are made up of property owners. That's first of all. Like in the UK, a lot of the business improvement districts are mostly made up of merchants or a blend. Here we have property owners, right? So that removes the day in and day out worry of the shop owner whose margins are thin and doesn't like change because, it's scary and businesses aren't that easy to run. Restaurants are going out of business every day, right? So like they don't want anything that they think is going to mess up whatever their Excel spreadsheet model is now working to tell them. But a property owner can look 2, 3, 4 tenants ahead, can think about 10 years from now. And that's very helpful. It's very helpful. And I think they understood that changing the front door of their building, as long as the trucks could get to their loading dock or they could do whatever they needed to do to service, a giant building, that this was going to benefit them. They had already made an investment in a business improvement district, which was planting flowers and keeping their street cleaner and providing a presence on the street, and this added to it.
But still fundamentally a bottom-up process instead of the opposite of top-down.
Yes. We could not do it without their support. It had to happen that way.
So as you were pitching this massive transformation of Broadway, there were many different types of stakeholders that you were looking to convince. You were looking to convince an administration, property owners, partners, the public. Mm-hmm. What were some kind of key moments where you felt like you faced some of your greatest challenges and how you got over some of those hurdles?
The one that sticks with me the most is the theater owners in Times Square, who, again, it's not a business that's just like, printing money all the time. And they have a very set idea about how that business model works and who their audiences are and how they get there. And there were only 3. There were 3 production companies, and that was it. And the health of Broadway as an institution, as a theater, the theaters, is critical to the health of New York City. So we really couldn't mess that up. they were not easy to convince. And like all of our projects, having it be a temporary redesign that was going to be reevaluated later and judged eventually by the mayor, who I believe they trusted. Rightly, they trusted Mike Bloomberg to make a good decision at the end of the day. And Mike definitely put us through our paces to make sure that we were doing this right. We had, millions of taxi GPS data that we could record, which was great. I was on the roof of the Dream Hotel taking, video back before our phones could take video. And just trying to do everything we could that was truly, really empirical and evidence-based. We had data to bring back to City Hall to show him, because he's an engineer and he likes data, and he needed to be convinced that this would work. But he was, and he greenlighted that project, in an election year, which is really saying something. You can't do this kind of work in any city without that level of leadership, both from your mayor and from your commissioner. It's just, they have to set the tone that way. And people need to know that they're expecting an outcome.
Hey, listeners, we hope you're enjoying this episode of our podcast. For those of you who are as enthusiastic about transportation and planning as we are, we'd like to hear from you. You can submit topics and questions that you'd like us to cover at nyc.gov/curb enthusiasm. And now, back to our conversation.
The evolutionary kind of aspect of our work is really fundamental to the success of all of our projects, or so many of our projects, right? You spoke about that being a way to convince people, perhaps skeptical people at the beginning, that don't worry, these are temporary materials. If it doesn't work, we can change it. Mm-hmm. But that's really a tactic that we've used to our success over the years, right? When you think about the evolution of the Broadway corridor, say over the past 15 years, we've made fundamental changes, like you said, at Greenlight for Midtown, which kind of established a new way of thinking. But then over the years, we've been able to evolve. We've been able to constantly make changes, tweaks here or there, building on the success, right? And we wouldn't be able to do that if it was all built out in concrete right from the start.
That's a good point. I mean, I kind of want to turn the tables on you guys, and I think this is a good time to do it because, terminating Broadway in the squares and then having it, access again, all we really thought about was the squares, how they're going to work, how they're going to be maintained, and the plazas that we created along the way down in the Garment District. And the street was like, it'll be much calmer, it'll be one lane with parking, we can have a bike lane, we did all the engineering, but really the focus was on the squares. What we didn't realize, I don't think at the time, was that we had sort of freed Broadway from the burden of having to carry anybody downtown anywhere, right? And so this is where you guys came in and started to realize that you had a lot of flexibility on that street. And it taught me a huge lesson in incrementalism, because what I've watched you do over the past 10 years is nothing short of remarkable. There's no street that works the way that Broadway works now, which is to say block by block treatment. Could be in a different direction, could be a plaza, could be, shared street. It's incredible. And so I want to hear about how you got to that, if I can turn the tables on you.
Yeah, we reached a point where Greenlight for Midtown really had catalyzed a complete paradigm shift along the corridor. We saw pre-Greenlight for Midtown about 1,500 vehicles in the peak hour using Broadway. We looked back at those same points in Times Square, and a few years later, it was like in the 350 vehicle in the peak, and even less further down the corridor. And we saw these amazing jewels along the necklace, or the charms along the bracelet, whatever is more current.
You saw the bracelet. We saw the charms.
Yeah,
that was all we cared about.
Exactly. So we had these charms along the bracelet, and we realized that actually the way to kind of keep creating a pedestrian and cyclist priority corridor in an incredibly dense part of New York City that had been developed around vehicles for so many years was to think about the necklace itself and, the chain itself. And a huge part of the shift was moving beyond the binary of the street is either open or closed, and think more about a sophisticated gradient. And it sounds a little counterintuitive, but to actually leave the cars on some of the blocks opened up some incredibly grand potential for pedestrian and cyclist prioritization. And we did hit this, one very kind of pivotal point in our design and planning thinking was one day when David came to the table and said, well, what if we just reverse that block of Broadway between 24th and 25th Street at Worth Square? And that really opened up a tremendous new set of opportunities.
Yeah, I think the key thing, though, was just as you said, Andy, Broadway was no longer a through street. So we didn't have to think about that from a transportation perspective anymore. It allowed us to think about the street block by block. What does this block need and how do we cater to it? What does the next block need and how do we cater to that? So it was thinking about Broadway as a series of connected public spaces. It's a network of public space, but still being able to manage it on the individual block by block basis. But at Flatiron at 24th Street, we had the very same problem that you were trying to resolve in 2009 at Times Square. We had this moment where you had these 3 points of traffic all arriving at the same time, and there was no good traffic solution to it. So the question was, well, how do we maintain access along the Broadway corridor for vehicles, but take it out of the traffic equation? And so that was how the Flatiron Shared Street was born. It was, well, we could keep access to this block of Broadway, but just flip the direction so it was no longer needed at that intersection with Fifth Avenue and 24th Street. And then that solved the traffic problem straight away. Then we found ourselves with this block where the traffic volumes would be extremely low. Like our after counts of this Flatiron Shared Street, it went down to 5 vehicles per hour. And then we found ourselves, well, now we have a street that has thousands of people as pedestrians that are interacting with it, but less than 10 vehicles. So let's completely flip the balance. And that was how the first Shared Street was born. It was this moment coming from a traffic solution, but then realizing that it completely unlocked this new pedestrian realm.
It was such a great idea. And while you were talking, I was just thinking, I'm sure most of the audience are, transportation folks, right? But, transportation is a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. Like, we're not looking around for a place to put a shared street because we're excited about that idea, right? It solves a problem. Right. And when you look at the corridor from 2009 to now, the redevelopment that's gone on, the rebranding that's gone on, the literally billions of dollars that have gone into retrofitting buildings so that they have ground floors now that are active. They have restaurants, they have cafes, you can sit out in the street. What's going on in Times Square is the hotels or the Marriott completely reinvented itself to present to the Broadway and the Plazas, where it had completely turned its back on it before. So it's an amazing combination of unlocking the potential of the street to throw off all of this, not just public life and public realm improvements, but also boost what people can do in a city and what the city can be for and all the different things that can happen there. It's astonishing.
And, speaking of incrementalism, for the longest time, and technically still at this very moment, it is only the bow tie blocks in Times Square that are built out permanently.
That's right.
And that created a tremendous opportunity, again, working in close partnership with these amazing bids along the corridor to continuously iterate and tweak and fine-tune these blocks. And, everything from us noticing that cyclists are using this corridor two-way. So let's figure out how we do that in a way that facilitates that safely and, further enforces cars to drive more slowly, taking more blocks out of the grid. One of our greatest successes was when we closed Broadway at Greeley Square. Mm-hmm. And it was no big deal.
Yeah. That was
no big deal.
That was a bridge too far for us.
Right.
And, you guys have just been nibbling away at this now for 10 years. And it really shows. And it's really taught me as someone who advises other cities that, it doesn't need to be everything everywhere all at once, right? It can be take a little bit and get people comfortable with that. And then I might say, you know what, maybe we could do this on a two-way street, or maybe we could do this on a bus route, or maybe we could do this on a street with, 10,000 cars on it and, build out the sidewalk here like this. And so as people learn and they watch these things, they grow and they change.
Absolutely. And you see it along Broadway too. Every single time we did a project, we evolved. And we got a little bit better, and we tried to, figure it out, and again fine tune some of these issues.
And Times Square and the work we did initially on Broadway was very. It had a big international impact, right? Like people still talk about it. It's part of Jeanette's calling card. It's part of my calling card. All of us. It's this big piece of the Bloomberg legacy. And it gave people this idea that, if we could do that, if New York could do that, right, then anybody could do anything, which was really exciting. But your ideas about how this street has evolved, then the non-binary aspect of it doesn't have to be open or closed. You don't have to think about it one way or the other. You can manage this street, and it can be different things in different places, is truly the transformative idea, I think, of streets really becoming something the major piece of our owned city asset that can really elevate different places in totally different ways. And sometimes it just has to be, it has to carry a lot of trucks and cars, and sometimes people need to be able to park there, and sometimes they don't, right? And this idea now has gone all over.
I think it's also an incredibly exciting aspect of our work kind of post-pandemic with the success of open streets.
Totally.
And so many different kinds of neighborhoods and communities, not your typical business corridor looking for slow, local, calm corridors in their neighborhoods. It's just been incredibly exciting to take what we've developed along Broadway and translate that to many different corridors across the city. 34th Avenue in Jackson Heights, Berry Street in Brooklyn, 31st Avenue in Astoria. Really exciting.
It is really exciting. It's really, really, every city learned some part of this lesson from the pandemic. Every city saw people out in their streets, and they saw fewer cars, and they understood that there was something that could potentially change. And most cities came away from the pandemic with some lesson from that. And we definitely came away, you definitely came away with some big lessons. And the other piece of it is the outdoor dining piece, which was an enormous leap of faith, was just an enormous trust given back to people to say, go ahead, operate, we'll inspect you later. We need these businesses to stay open. We need restaurants to stay open. Nighttime in the city without restaurants is, I think it was Marcus Samuelson who said, restaurants are nighttime retail. Right? It's like, that's what enlivens the street at night. If my walk home didn't take me past, a bar and a couple of restaurants, those are the bright points on my walk home in the dark. And so we trusted people, and they really delivered. And they also showed us, maybe we don't need, 15,000 parking spaces is a lot of parking spaces. So I think that was really tremendous. And I give your former commissioner, I give Polly Trottenberg a lot of credit for being able to make that leap, and you guys a lot of credit for making it work.
And that's one of the kind of newest updates to some of our rules in the concession model that you helped spearhead here, is allowing for concessions on open streets and having those businesses partake, so that, again, there's this physical local value, but then that value also locally goes back into the space itself and the partners, and really helping to support the energy that's coming out of all these amazing neighborhoods across New York City.
No, it's great. It's really great, and it's exciting to be here and watch this stuff happen. And I think, a lot of cities have something to learn from the way that you've done things here, and I try to bring some of those lessons around, and I always give you credit. So
nice. And I think the other thing that we've known about Broadway, but it has really become all the more important as we work on some of these other corridors, is the importance of the larger transportation network and ecosystem around the Broadway corridor. So one of the things that has made Broadway such a success, in addition to everything we've been talking about, is the fact that there has been so much work done to shape the bicycle network, the transit network around Broadway, that allows for the faster through routes for everybody that needs to get everywhere else. And that kind of balance, that environment of and, not or, has created a real culture shift on Broadway. And I think that's a call that we're seeing, a need that we're seeing as we work in the gridded neighborhoods of 34th Avenue, of Berry Street, and so on. Like, what else do we need to be building in and around this corridor to really support a major transformation, because there are more people walking, biking, and riding transit in New York City every day because of all the amazing people that have worked here now and in the past.
So, Andy, a question that we love to ask all of our guests here on the podcast is, what is your biggest public transportation pet peeve?
It's people eating on the subway. And I understand that some people really are busy, right? And they're going from one place to another, and they have to eat on the subway, right? And that's just, they have 3 jobs, and that's just where that needs to fit into their lives. But I can't be any, like, the two things do not mix for me. Just the subway environment and food, no. So I just, I walk away.
I feel the same way about people eating in meeting rooms.
Oh, really? I used to do that all the time. I figured it was better than the subway.
Yeah. And Andy, what are you most enthusiastic about for the future of transportation?
I guess I'm just, I want to see where this is all going. I was reading a report a couple of weeks ago that was, written 10 years ago. And this report had figured, you can work this out now, but in 10 years, it'll all be, autonomous vehicles, and this whole thing's going to change. So, you don't have to worry about that too much. And of course, that didn't come about. And we're looking at why, and we're thinking about it. And this whole issue with micromobility and just the way people are getting around, I think it's exciting. I'm sure this is sort of everybody's answer, but watching it evolve, watching us figure these things out, the bicycle, Amazon trucks, right? This is all kind of fascinating. And sometimes it goes through these little ugly phases, and then we figure that out, and then and then we move on to the next problem. And I mean, I'm really excited to see how we're going to figure out dealing with, mopeds and electric vehicles, because it's a real conundrum, and it is everywhere. But it's particularly here. How are we going to figure out where they fit into the system, or how to make the system so that it fits? Because it's a great way to get around, right? But right now we haven't figured that one out. And I think just watching the whole system adapt to these different things is going to be really fascinating.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time. It has been amazing thinking about and working and shaping Broadway with both of you over time. We're at an exciting moment where this administration has contributed upwards of $300 million to make a lot of this work permanent. So we're finally going to build out a few more blocks than those that we have. So excited for the future. And thanks for coming back and sharing all that history with us. And yeah, excited to keep on figuring it out.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing an amazing job. And thank you for asking me here. It's been really great to come back.